All right. Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen. To the right of the video on a larger screen. It looks like we got a couple questions in there. All right. So Andrew says, hello. I wonder where I should start in the introductory videos. You asked us to go to start here, opening drive. I have looked through the content and out of curiosity, I wonder why don't start first with Tuskegee Golf System courses where stable fluid spine is dealt with first and also further on. If I want to reset my playing, where do I start with the very basics and build on through the right exercises in the order? Would it be more correct to start with Tuskegee Golf System courses, or is it smart to review the opening drive before going on? Just don't want to build on bad habits, want to start in the right place. So the opening drive steers you in the direction to start in the right place. So I would recommend, going through that. That's basically the whole idea of the opening drive is to kind of get you on the right track for yourself. But generally, here's what I would recommend. And this, most of this is completely really self-guided, right? You watch the videos, you do the drills, you get better, right? Wherever you want to start is 100% fine, right? There's no, it's not that you're gonna like it's gonna be bad to start in any certain way, right? So here's what I would recommend doing is if you lack club head speed and you want to hit the ball farther, which I think pretty much everyone is in the boat of needing to hit the ball farther. I would recommend the 20-minute distance fix. Now, if you are just hitting it all over the map, like hitting it slices, hooks, all over the map, and adding club head speed to just make you hit it farther into the woods, like you're hitting your tee shots into the woods, like on every swing. 20-minute distance fix is probably not the best bet for you. I'd probably go the 20-minute shallowing fix. But pretty much everyone, for the most part, is going to benefit from getting some club head speed. So just as some guidelines, let's say that you play 6,000 yards mostly. Well, unless you're swinging 100 miles an hour plus, then you would benefit from getting more club head speed for sure. And even if you are swinging 100 plus, you could still benefit from getting more club head speed. But I would say that would be kind of like the cutoff. Now, if you're playing about 6,500 yards, I would say 110 would be about where you want. If you're not swinging 110 as your baseline, like your playing speed, then I would recommend the 20-minute distance fix because it's definitely going to help you to improve on that. And then if you're playing 7,000 yards, then I would say 120 would be what I would be kind of trying to get to. Not that you can't play good golf on a 7,000 yard course with 110 club head speed or whatever. It's just that you're going to benefit a lot from, because it's just going to be a lot easier to play that distance if that is the case. So really, there's two courses that I would look at first. I would look at the 20-minute distance fix if you're wanting to get some distance. If you're not hitting it all over the map, then I would definitely recommend the 20-minute distance fix. If you are hitting it all over the map, I'd recommend the 20-minute shallowing fix, right? Because that's going to get you to where you're honing in your ball flight a lot better, right? So those would be the two things that I would recommend out of the gate. And the reason why is that both of those courses are more like quick win type courses, right? You're going to get results pretty quickly from both of those courses. So that's why I would recommend that to kind of get you going. And there's elements of the Tuskegee Golf System in both of those, right? Just like in the 20-minute distance fix, we're talking about getting a big turn. It's a power turn, basically, right? So those are going to help you to get a quick win out of the bat. And then the Tuskegee Golf System is more of a slow burn kind of thing because you're changing your swing, and right, and making swing changes takes time. We tell you to do thousands of reps in there because it's really what it takes to make change to your swing, right? So that's why I don't really necessarily recommend going straight into the Tuskegee Golf System. I get a quick win doing some other things and then go from there. But there could be that maybe your distance isn't a big thing. You're not hitting it all over the place, but man, your putting is terrible, right? Well, in that situation, it'd probably be beneficial for you to go to the Toss Golf putting system and work through that. So I think everybody's a little bit different, but really, what you have to do is you do your best to kind of figure out what, as long as you're doing something and working towards something, you are getting better, right? So I would just pick something, go with it, whatever you want to do, just go and do it, and then and then go on to the next thing once you've improved that. Once you got into where you want to go with that, that's what I would really recommend doing, because there's no really wrong way to go about it. It's just about going with something, picking something, and going with it. If you want to just do the Toss Golf system, then go get into it and go and do it, and don't hesitate. Just get to work. You know what I mean? All right, so Dan A says, "Hey Q, I saw an interview with Tiger Woods where he says that he lets his hands fall from the backswing before he starts rotating in the downswing. Can you explain that in more detail? Do you even recommend doing that? Thanks." So one thing we have to be very, very careful with is listening to tour players when they talk about what they're doing in their swing or what they feel they're doing, because that's exactly what it is. It's usually just a feel. Right. If you look at Tiger's swing, if you watch him swing the club, he's literally not doing that. Right. He's not going up to the top of the swing, then going like this and going through. That's not what's happening. Right. But that may be a feel that he's having to get him to have the club. So because maybe he was going up to the top. Maybe right now he's having a tendency to kind of open up and kind of leave his arms up and his hands get too far out. And maybe he's coming down a little bit steep. Maybe. I mean, I don't work with Tiger. I wish I did. But that may be something that he's working on, right, in his swing, but that's not literally what's happening. So we really have to be careful when we're listening to tour players talk about their swings, because usually they're talking about feels, right? And usually a tour player's feels or a pro's feels aren't going to be the same as someone else's feels, or even another pro's feels, right? Even someone at the same level, it's not going to be the same, because everyone's got different issues in their swing. So be really careful when you're listening to tour players talk about their swing, pros or anything like that, or anyone talking about what they're trying to do in their swing, because a lot of times, literally, that's not what's happening. So I don't literally recommend doing that. I don't recommend going up to the top of the swing and pushing your arms down and then turning through. I don't recommend doing that. But that could be a good feel if you are someone who is just really opening up your body and throwing your arms, out over the top. That could be a good feel for someone who's doing that. So if that's the case, then sure, yeah, you could try that out and see if that helps. But if it's not, then that may not be a good feel for you to have. So Paul S says shaft lean at address, in particular a hybrid, also wedges with a full swing, always shaft lean at address. So to be honest with you, it really doesn't matter. Shaft lean at address, no shaft lean at address, it really does not matter. It only matters at impact, how much shaft lean you have. So what I would say is, generally, if you have a weaker grip where your hands are more on the side of the grip, right? My hands are more like this. The thumbs are going down kind of the top of the grip here. If I'm like this, my hands are going to be more in front of my body. That's where it's going to be most comfortable. And I'm not going to have a lot of shaft lean there, right? And then if I have a hybrid, my ball position is probably going to be a little bit more forward. I'm going to have even less shaft lean there, right? So if you have a weaker grip, generally you're not going to have as much shaft lean. Now, if you have a stronger grip, or shaft lean at address, if you have a stronger grip, where now your lead hand's more on top of the grip, your trail hand's more under, right? So if I have a really strong grip, if I go to the other end of the spectrum, right? So I talked about this would be like a very weak grip, right? Where my hand's on the side of the grip. And then if I go to a really strong grip, my hand's on top of the grip, right? Well, now if I do that and I try to put my hands in front, that's really uncomfortable, right? Because I'm really having to kind of push my hand in front of me. This is just not a very comfortable position. So if I just kind of relax and just let my arms kind of hang with that strong grip, well, now I have more shaft lean at address. This is a much more comfortable position to have with a very strong grip. So generally speaking, what I've noticed is that if you have a weaker grip, you're going to tend to have less forward press, less shaft lean at address. And if you have a stronger grip, you're going to tend to have that. It's going to be more comfortable for you to have the hands more forward at address, because the angles and stuff that your wrists are in and that your arms are in it's going to be more comfortable to have the hands more forward. So that's generally, but even if you had a really strong grip and you like to have the club less shaft lean at address, it's okay. It only matters. The ball does not care what's happening at address. It does not care. It only cares about how the club is being delivered to it at impact. That's all it cares about. So shaft lean address, no shaft lean address, you really do what works best for you or what's most comfortable for you. Because to be honest with you, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Paul S says, my question was always shaft lean address for hybrids that are. My question was always shaft lean at address for hybrids that are mid irons. So, like I said, a lot of it's just going to depend on where it really doesn't matter, but generally, it's going to be more comfortable to have shaft lean if you have a stronger grip, and not a lot of shaft lean if you have a weaker grip at address. All right, so let's keep going. So Ron Raven Hill says, where is the butt end of the handle when releasing the club for best results? Well, when by definition, the butt end of the club is pointing back at you, if that's what you're asking. So basically, just to kind of define what the release is, right? The release is when we've basically gotten rid of all of our lag, and now this club is splitting our forearms, right? So in the release, by definition, the butt end of the club is just going to be pointing straight back at me, right? So if I'm coming through, let's say I release at the ball, I have an early release, I release at the ball, the butt end of the club is going to be pointing right back at me. If I release it where we see a lot of the best players, right? When I'm coming in, I have shaft lean at impact, and then I release it out in front where a lot of the best players are releasing it. You're going to see it's going to be pointing straight back into me, straight back up toward my chest, right? Toward my, my sternum area. That's where the butt end of the club's going to be pointing. Let's keep going. So Ron Ravenhill had another question. Says, do thicker grips or +4 grips help with overdrawing the ball for especially 3-wood and driver? I actually have a video that I did on this. And no, the thicker or thinner grips in general do not change the rotation of the hands. It only makes a difference if it's heavier or lighter, right? So if you have a heavier grip, it's going to, I believe, if I remember right, if it's a heavier grip, there's going to be a little less rotation, right? Which means that can help you to not overdraw the ball, right? And then if it's a lighter grip, there will be more rotation, which can result in with getting the club face more closed, right? So it's more the weight of the grip, that the actual physical weight, putting it on a scale, that weight can affect the rotation through there, but the actual thickness of the grip doesn't. So what I would say as far as thickness of the grip is concerned is I would just pick whatever grip is most comfortable for your hands, right? So generally, if you have larger hands, you're probably going to be more comfortable with thicker grips, right? If you have fairly average size hands, you're probably going to be more comfortable with just like the standard type grip. If you have smaller hands, you may be more comfortable with a thinner grip, right? So I would just pick a grip that's just the most comfortable for you. And that doesn't mean that if you have average size hands, you may not find a larger grip more comfortable. It's really personal preference when it comes to the actual thickness of the grip. So I would just play around with it, find what feels the best to you. Everyone's going to be a little bit different in that regard. But as far as I would not expect it to change the rotation of the face, your ability to rotate or not. They've done research on this and they found that it really doesn't make any difference. Whereas the weight of the grip they found actually does make a difference when they tested players. And the difference is that heavier grips will tend to rotate the face less, and lighter grips will tend to rotate the face more. So if you have a bigger, thicker grip and it's also heavier, right, then yes, it could reduce the amount of rotation of the club face. But a lot of those grips that are thicker, they actually make them the same weight. So that way there isn't an issue with, because most golfers struggle with getting the club face closed, right? So if they make a thicker grip that people like the thickness of, but then they also make it to where it's too heavy, then a lot of golfers may have a hard time getting the club face closed to be able to to be able to hit some good shots, right? They're to be able to hit it straight. They'll tend to leave the face open and slice it. All right, let's get going. All right, so Ron Raven had another question. Says, do you release the driver earlier than irons? No, it's typically going to be about the same. If anything, we see when we studied a lot of the best players, typically we've seen the driver actually being released a little bit later. That's more because of the angle of the body, right? So with an iron, right, our spine angles aren't going to be as angled away. So generally with a driver, we're wider and then we're more angled away as we're coming in, which promotes a little bit of a later release. So usually it's pretty much about the same, or the driver may actually be a slightly later release when we look at the better players, but really it's pretty much the same where it's releasing. All right, so Steve G says, hi Q, when I'm chipping, where should the shaft direction release? I have a tendency to chip to the right or left, and was thinking that if I release the club in the direction of the target, I might have a better direction to my target. Any insights how to keep the chip to go in the direction that it should go, let's say for 20 yards? So as far as, let's answer the first part as far as where it's releasing. It really depends on the trajectory that you're going for, right? So if you're going for a high trajectory kind of shot, we don't want to have a lot of, I wouldn't want to, if I was trying to hit a high trajectory, I wouldn't want to have it releasing way out here. I maybe want to have a little bit of shaft lean at contact and then kind of a release like that, right? So if I was trying to hit a high one, right, I would kind of come in, this may be my impact position, a little bit of shaft lean, and then it may release, shortly after that. If I was trying to hit a really low one, right, then I would get my hands more forward at impact, more shaft lean, and then it would release a little bit more in front, like it would for like a normal shot, or even maybe even a little bit more if I was really trying to drive it in low, right? It may release way out here, right? So as far as where it's releasing, that's going to depend a lot on the trajectory that you're going for. Generally, for chip shots, we typically want a higher, softer trajectory, for really close to the greens. So typically, it's going to be a little bit of an earlier release. So it's going to be coming in a little bit of shaft lean, and then a little, the release is kind of somewhere in that area, maybe 20 degrees out in front. But that's not really going to affect the direction the shot has as much as the actual face angle of the club. That's really what's going to dictate where the ball starts. The direction that it goes the most is the face angle of the club. So if you're, I don't know which way you're missing, but if you're missing to the right, the club face is generally going to be too open. If it's missing to the left, the face is going to be too closed. So what we have to understand for these shorter chip shots is that we don't need to change the face, right? So if you're hinging the club up a lot, I definitely stop doing that because that makes it a little bit harder to control the face. A small amount of hinge, and then I would just try to keep that face square to your arc, right? So if this is my arc, right, the club's coming back on an arc. What you don't want to do is bring the club back and really roll the face open, because now I have to undo that, and now I have to have some sort of timing mechanism. Now for a full swing, that's necessary to get the club up to the top. For a little chip shot where we're only basically going to here to there, right? Or, for a 20-yard shot, I mean, it may only be to there, right? Depending on what club you're hitting. Just keep that club face square to the arc, right? It doesn't need to roll open. You don't need to shut it either. So I see some people kind of shut the face. So don't rotate your wrist. Just bring the club back, keep it square to the arc, right? And then bring it back the same way. Don't roll it open or shut it. Just keep it square to the arc. Right? So there should be no twisting of the hands. And if you do that, you'll be much more consistent with the start direction of the ball. One other thing that I would look at is where you're hitting the ball on the club face. If you hit the ball way on the toe, it can start more to the right because the face twists open a little bit. If the ball on the heel, it can start to the left. for right-handed golfer because the face twists close a little bit. So focus on hitting the ball in the center of the face and focus on getting the club face square, right, as you're coming in. Don't roll the face open or shut it. Keep it square throughout the entire zone, and you will start hitting the ball a lot straighter with your chips. All right, let's keep going. So Paul S says, playing in Texas afternoon wind to get lower penetrating key setup position for driver and iron, and also long irons. Well, with the driver, it's already going to be coming in pretty low. So I would just focus on coming in pretty level and hitting the ball in the middle of the club face. That's going to help you the most, with the driver. So I wouldn't try to like tee it high and hit up on it a bunch to try to launch it in the air. I would just tee it a little bit lower so that way you're hitting it in the center of the club face. What's really important is not to hit it low on the club face, because if you hit it low on the club face, it will add spin and that will kill it in the wind, right? So it's really important to hit it in the center of the face, or maybe just barely above the center of the club face. So tee it up at a height that's going to allow you to do that. And then just come in very level with the ball if you want to bring it. We don't want to hit down on it, because again, if you hit down on it, that will add spin and then it's going to balloon up on you. So if you want to have that low penetrating ball flight with the driver, tee it up at a height that's going to allow you to hit it in the center of the face or just slightly above the center of the face, and then put it in a ball position that's going to allow you to swing very level with the ball. I don't know your golf swing, so I don't know where that's going to be. So you're going to have to kind of play around with that, go to the range and play around with different tee heights in ball positions to see what trajectories that you get. But that's what I'd be trying to do. And then for irons, basically what I would do for hitting with irons is you can play the ball a little bit back in the stance to make it go lower, but you don't want to play it so far back in the stance that you put a lot of spin on it. Because remember, we don't want to put a ton of spin on the ball, because when you do that, it will balloon up into the wind, right? So really the keys to playing in the wind are really focusing on solid contact. When you don't hit the ball in the center of the face, it adds spin. So hit the ball in the center of the face, make sure that you're hitting it solid. And then I would use less loft where you can, right? So, I think a lot of people, are afraid to maybe, if let's say they're hitting into the wind, right? And let's say you normally hit it's 150 yards and you normally hit an 8-iron 150 yards. Well, if you hit an 8-iron here, it might go, if you're hitting into a 20-25 mile an hour wind, that 8-iron might go 120 yards, right? If you do that. So you may need to hit a shot that, if you got a 150-yard shot, you may need to hit a club that goes 180 yards, right? And for you, if you're hitting your 8-iron 150, that might be like a 5-iron, right? So don't be afraid to do that, because that's generally what it's going to take. So actually, there was a post yesterday. I kind of always thought this was but they actually did some research on it and did the math and engineering on it to actually kind of figure it out. So if you're hitting into the wind, for every mile per hour, it's basically 1 yard off, right? So if you're hitting into the wind and it's you're hitting into a 10 mile per hour wind, you need to hit a club that's going to hit it 10 extra yards, right? Now, trajectory and things like that can definitely make a difference. So if you're a very high trajectory player, you may need to be more than that. If you're a very low trajectory player, it may need to be less than that. But generally speaking, it's going to be about one mile per hour for 1 yard from the research that I saw. Now, if you have a tailwind, it's about half, right? So unfortunately, a tailwind doesn't help you as much as a headwind hurts you, right? So yeah, it's going to be about half. So if you have a 10 mile per hour wind behind you, you need to hit a club that would go 5 yards less, right? And again, trajectory makes a difference. If you're a high trajectory player, that tailwind is going to help you a little bit more. If you're a lower trajectory player, the tailwind isn't going to help you as much. But that's kind of what I would be looking at, is just kind of doing that. You can play the ball a little bit back in the stance, but really there isn't much into the wind that you really need to do. You just need to focus on hitting the ball solidly, right? Hit the ball solid. If you hit the ball solid, it won't be as affected by the wind. If you hit the ball really thin, or if you hit it way on the toe, way on the heel, the wind will gobble that up a lot more because you're going to put more spin on it, right? So focus on hitting the ball in the center of the club face, and then club up or down accordingly, and you will be good at hitting the ball in the wind. Another trick that I actually like to do is to keep it out of the wind, because I played my college golf in South Dakota, North Dakota, and it gets windy up there. So I had to learn, and I was a high trajectory player. I had to learn how to play into the wind. So, I hit a lot of, 5-irons from like 140 into the wind. And basically what I would do is I would just choke up on a 5-iron, and I would just take like a 3/4 swing, and it would keep it really, really low. And, into the wind, the wind's because the wind is going to increase the spin on the ball, it actually kind of would go up a little bit. It's still low, but it wouldn't be as much, like, because normally you might, if I had a 140-yard shot, I'm hitting into a 20 mile per hour wind, that might be like an 8-iron, because normally I would hit like a pitching wedge, right? But if I hit an 8-iron, because I was such a high trajectory player, that it affected it quite a bit more, and I had a lot less control of it because the ball would just skyrocket into the sky, right? So in that situation, I would just choke up on a 5-iron, right? Less loft, so that's going to be less spin, and I would take a shorter swing, right, which is going to help me to have more control of my strike. And so I take like a 3/4 swing, and then I would hit it, and it would just kind of pierce through the air, right? So those are the kind of things that you can do. But that's really what I would recommend doing, is just focus on hitting it dead center in the club face and have control. And the biggest mistake that I see a lot of people make when they hit into the wind is they try to swing harder. And the problem with that is that, one, you're going to be less likely to hit it in the center of the face. And two, if you try to muscle up a club with a lot of loft, you're just going to add more spin, and you're going to hit it higher, and the wind's just going to gobble it up even more. So you're much, much better off doing the opposite and using a lot more club, taking a shorter swing, and maybe even a slower swing that you can control, and make sure that you hit it in the center of the face, because that's going to allow you to have much more control of what's going on. So I think a lot of people are just, I don't know why, it may just be ego or whatever it is, but don't be afraid. Who cares if it's a 5-iron and you're 130 yards out? Who cares? If you're hitting it on the green, you're making the right play. It's about getting the ball on the green, right? So that's what I would recommend doing. So Steve G says, also, do you change your grip for chipping around the green? Really depends on what kind of shot I'm trying to hit. If it's a chip where I'm trying to stand up the shaft a little bit, my grip may change. It may get a little bit more in my hands, right? It may be closer to like a putting grip, right? So let's say I have a chip where, I'm almost kind of doing it like putting style, right? Where I kind of stand the shaft up a little bit. Well, in this situation, right, I'm going to have the club's going to be more in my hands, right? So that would be where my grip would be a little bit different. But if it's just kind of a normal, I'm trying to sole the club to the ground, right, my grip really isn't going to change very much. But if you're standing the club up, you're going to move closer to where the club would be in your hands for a putt. So more in the hands, less in the fingers. All right, so Ron Ravenhill says, what is the easiest way to calm hands down when overturning my hands turn too quickly? What the easiest way to calm hands down when overturning my hands turn too quickly? Yeah, I'm not really sure. I guess what's the easiest way to quiet the hands? Is that I guess that's kind of what you're saying. Well, you have to look at what is the reasoning for that. Typically, the hands are really rolling over or overturning because you're trying to get the club face closed. So if you have more face stability throughout the swing, or club, more control of the club face throughout the swing, then that's going to help you. So if you're rolling this face open in the backswing, and then it's open at the top of the swing, and then it's open coming down, well, you're going to need to do something to get that club face closed. So you're going to need to really get the club face turning over. So that's more than likely what's happening. So I'd focus on trying to keep that club face more square to my arc and my backswing. So have this club face kind of more matching my posture here. I'm going to get up to the top of the swing. I want to have that club face pointing toward the sky a little bit, right? So if it's pointing like that, that club face is going to be open, right? If I have it more pointing toward the sky a little bit, that face is going to be a little bit more square. And then as I'm coming down, I want to have that club face kind of matching my posture. And that's going to make it to where I don't, if I were to really roll over my hands, that club face would be so closed, I might hit myself in the shin, right? Intuitively, you're not going to do that, right? Because that club face is in a good position. I can keep turning through. So I would look at your club face control throughout the swing and make sure, okay, am I rolling this face open? Is it open at the top? Just kind of look at those angles and then work on basically trying to keep those wrists more. Because basically, whatever you do in the backswing with your wrists, you have to undo in the downswing. So if you're really rolling that face open, you're going to have to roll it back over in the downswing. And if you're waiting until the last second, right, to get that over, you're going to feel like you're needing to do that. So that's what I would look at in your swing. Take a look on video and see what's going on there. So RC says, any tips for hitting a 30-yard bunker shot that have to clear a lip? My ball just barely gets out of the bunker, no matter how hard I swing. Use less loft. If you want to hit the ball farther, you got to use less loft. Now, if that amount of loft doesn't allow you to get the ball up, then you're kind of in a bad situation, because you're in a situation where because really you can hit a bunker blast shot with a pitching wedge if you want it, right? It just may not get as high. It'll go farther, but may not just get as high. So I play around with that, but really just keep the face open. Really feel like you're keeping that face open all the way through. And if you use that less loft, it's going to go farther, right? So that's what I would be doing, is just trying to use less loft to hit farther, see if you can get up over the lip. If you can't get it up over that lip, then you're like I said, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're not getting up over the lip. You may need the loft to get up over the lip, right? So yeah, you may not be in a situation where you can't do that. So what I'd be doing outside, if you find yourself in that situation where, okay, if I use my high lofted club, I can get up over the lip, but it only gets halfway there maybe, right? But if I use the lower lofted club, I can get it there, but I can't get it up over the lip. If you're in that situation, then I would find every way you can avoid getting into that situation in the first place, right? So from a strategic standpoint, whatever's going on this hole, right, that you're finding yourself in this position all the time, you need to change the way that you're playing the hole to avoid being in that situation, to play more to your strengths. So that's what I would recommend doing. But yeah, try a longer, a less lofted club. See if you can get up over the lip. If not, like I said, I would really try to avoid hitting it in that area where you have a 30-yard bunker shot over a lip. That sounds like a tough shot. All right, so Dick P says, how can you get out of the sand? Try TSG videos, but end up hitting ball into the edge of the trap. How can you get question? So yeah, guys, when you're asking your questions, try to make sure that it's like a full sentence, because it's getting hard to, some of these questions have been hard to know exactly what you're asking. So it sounds like you're asking how to hit a bunker shot, Like I said, we have lots of videos on the site, so I would just video yourself and see if you're actually doing what we're talking about in the video, and then you know make changes accordingly to that. So really, the best thing that you can do is go to your practice bunker. Right, if you want to be good out of the bunker, you have to practice it. Uh, it's not gonna You're not gonna be able to just watch it. Not saying that this is what you're doing, but you're not gonna be able to just watch the video and then be good, be good at the bunker. You have to actually go practice it. That's how you really become good at it. Um, so, and to be honest with you, I don't practice very much anymore. And I went out last week and uh, practiced some bunker shots, and I sucked. I was terrible, just because I was just out of practice. I hadn't done it in a while. So I definitely go practice it. So what I would recommend doing is put some balls in lined up in a bunker, draw a line in the sand 4 to 6 inches behind, 4 to 6 inches in front, and just practice coming in, hitting the sand at the first line, exiting the sand at the second line, and then having that club glide underneath the ball. If you do that, and you'll be in better shape for it. As far as the technique is concerned, this has gone over in the videos that I'm sure you watch, but we'll go over it real quick. Open the club face. One of the biggest things that I see is people just don't open the club face. I understand it may not be comfortable to open the club face this much, but it's how you hit a bunker shot, right? And if opening the club face is truly something to you that you just cannot get over, then I'd recommend getting a club like the C3I wedge, because you do not have to open up the club face with that club because it has an extreme amount of bounce on it. You can keep that club face square and just basically do exactly this, right? So I'd recommend, if you're really struggling to get out of bunkers, I'd really recommend a club like that, because it does make it easier. The problem with a club like that is that it's not as versatile as like a Vokey wedge, right? It basically is only good mostly for just hitting out of greenside bunkers. But if that's a really bad part of your game, and you're doing everything you can to avoid going in bunkers, but you're still getting into them several times around, but every time you do it, it's double or worse or something like that, then I definitely recommend, it would be a good investment for you to get a C3I wedge. I don't think they're that expensive. I think they're $100 or something like that. They're less than like what a Vokey wedge is. And I would definitely recommend using that, because it can definitely shave some strokes off your game. I mean, let's say you're going into a bunker 3 times around, and every time you go into a bunker, it's a double or worse because you're going from one side to the other, and you're chunking it out of the bunker or whatever, then you got to think about how many strokes you can save yourself by basically getting no worse than a bogey. If you're getting out every time and then 2-putting, right? Maybe every now and then you'll get out in 1-putt, right? Then you got to think about how many strokes you're saving just by getting a club. So I definitely recommend that. I know it's not the prettiest club. That's kind of one of my knocks on it. Basically, I only really have 2 knocks on it. One is that it's not versatile, right? It's not really a club that you're going to be able to use much else anywhere else than a bunker for the most part. You can hit it off of the turf, but it just has so much loft on it. It's not going to be a real high percentage play off of the grass. Now, if you're in a situation where you need to get the ball up quickly, maybe you're in the rough or something like that, I think it can definitely be used in that area too. But for the most part, it's just going to be out of the bunker. And the other part is it's just not a very pretty club. I wish they could make a club like that looks really good, that looks like a Vokey, but nobody's done that yet. But that's definitely a club that I would recommend. Now, let's say I ain't getting that club. I want to learn how to do this, with a normal type wedge, like a Vokey wedge, Cleveland wedge, whatever. Then what you got to do is you got to open up that club face. So basically, that club face, you need that club face essentially pointing up to the sky, right? So I got this club face open 45 degrees here. So about 45 degrees. You see, I put that down. That's going to be pointing up to the sky, right? I'm going to have a nice wide stance. A couple of reasons for that. One is for stability, right? Sand is not a stable surface. So if we get wider, that helps us to have a little bit more stability. And then I'm going to have the ball a little bit forward of my stance. generally about 4 to 6 inches forward of the middle. So what I think is, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to have this club enter the sand in the middle of my stance, and then I'm going to have that ball about 4 inches in front of that, right? So there's the middle of my stance right there. The ball's there. I'm going to have this club enter the sand there, and then I'm just going to make a swing, and I'm going to have this club enter the sand here and exit the sand there. Swing hard, right? You need to swing with club head speed because you got to realize you're not hitting the golf ball. You're hitting the sand, and the sand, you will make some contact with the ball, but it's a very small amount of contact. It's mostly the sand propelling the ball onto the green, right? So get that face open, slide that club underneath there with lots of speed, and then makes it a little bit easier. The other good thing about the C3I is you don't have to have a ton of club head speed to be a really good sand player. It does require some amount of that, some amount of speed. But that's really it's not. I think people complicate the sand game a little bit. It's really not any more complicated than that. Open the club face, wide stance, hit the sand 4 to 6 inches behind, swing hard, ball will come out. If you do that, if that's difficult, or if you don't have enough club head speed, that can be difficult. If you're having trouble leaving that face open because it's just not comfortable for you or whatever it might be, then I'd recommend a C3I wedge. It could definitely make things a little bit easier. All right, so Paul S says greenside bunker with very solid sand. How to play? So really, what we have to understand what's happening when soft sand. Why we need to open up the face. The reason why you open up the face is so that way you can expose the bounces. You're getting the leading edge out off the sand. So that way, the first thing that's contacting the sand is really this chunk of metal down here and not the leading edge. So you got to think about it this way. If you're a water skier and you're skiing on top of the water, right? You want to have the nose up out of the water so that way you can glide on top of the water. If you got the nose of the skis down, right, then then you're going to dive into the water. So that's the same thing with the leading edge of the club. If I get this leading edge of the club coming in and contacting the sand first, my wedge is going to dig into the sand, right? If I get this, the chunk of metal, then it's going to kind of glide through the sand, right? And that's what I want out of normal sand conditions. Now, if I'm in harder sand conditions, then I still want the club to glide through the sand, but I'm not going to be able to do it in the same way I would out of soft sand, because if I did, it may bounce out of the sand a little bit, and then I may end up scolding it. So if you're in that situation, basically what you do is you just open up the face a little bit less, right? You open up the face a little bit less. That helps to not glide so much. It will dig a little bit if you expose the bounce a little bit less. So maybe if this is like a normal sand bunker where you have the club face 45 degrees open and the club face is pointing up to the sky, you may have it a little less open. Now, the thing is here is that not all more solid sand bunkers are created equal, right? Some are going to be like concrete, right? And some are going to be maybe they're normally soft, but they got wet and they're a little bit harder right now, right? So it really is something you're going to have to practice to kind of be able to judge how hard the sand is and to know what adjustments you need to make. That is a skill that you have to learn by doing. But generally, you're going to open it a little bit less. You're actually going to hit a little bit closer to the golf ball, a little bit. So we're talking like 2 to 4 inches now. Again, dependent on how hard the sand is. If it's really hard sand, you're going to need to hit closer to it, and you're going to need to have the face a little less open, right? And you're going to come in, and you may even need to feel like you're hitting down on the spot to get underneath it, right? If it's just a little bit less soft, right, or it's just a little bit solid, then it may be you may not have to ease off on some of those things. So really, what it comes down to is if it's harder than normal sand, you have to do some amount of less opening of the club face, some amount of hitting a little bit closer to the golf ball. Instead of 4 to 6 inches, it may be 2 to 4 inches, right? And you may need to do some amount of actually kind of really trying to thump the sand, really hitting the sand behind the golf ball to get that club to dig a little bit, because we want to get it to get underneath the ball, but we want it to kind of glide through there. We don't want it to get underneath the ball and then keep digging underneath it. We want it to get underneath the ball and then glide through there. So that's why you may want to hit down to get it underneath the ball. And then we have the bounce on there a little bit still that's going to help it to glide through there. So what I recommend doing, and this is what I did, you have to go out. The best thing that you could possibly do to get better at it hitting out of the sand is really go spend a day out there and go practice it. You have to go practice it. Bring like a jug of water with you, and if you normally have like a soft sand bunker, hit some shots out of there. Put some water into it. We'll see what happens. Put some water again. Pack it down a little bit. Change your technique a little bit. See what happens. Pour some water in there again, and really pack it down a ton. See what differences it makes. That's really the best way to kind of learn and figure out how to do this, is to go out there, experiment with it, experiment hitting closer to it, experiment opening and closing the face less or more, right? That would be my best advice to you if you really want to get good at doing those things. So Byron M says, what is the name of the sand wedge you were discussing? I could not understand what you were saying. C3I. The letter C, the number 3, and the letter I. C is in Colorado, 3 is in the number 3, and then I is in Idaho. Just do a Google search on it, and you'll find it. If they're still selling it, if they're not, there's lots of companies out there that make. That's probably like the latest one. I think Alien is another one that makes a wedge like that. Basically, it's just a super high bounce wedge with a lot of loft. So basically what it is they're just taking if you open up the club face, they're just taking this same thing with a ton of bounce on it, right? And then they're just making that into a square face club. So they put I think the C3I wedge is like a 65-degree club or something like that. It's really high lofted, maybe more than that, maybe 70. But then it's got a big hunk of metal on here that just helps it kind of glide through the sand. And really all you got to do is it is a lot easier, right? They're talking about making the rules, being able to add clubs. I tell you what, if they do that, I would probably have a wedge like that in my bag, because it's just a lot easier to hit wedge shots with that. If you can have 18 clubs in your bag, why not have one that's specifically good for bunker play? I would definitely have a club like that. I would have that, and I would also have like a chipper type club. I don't know if they're making it anymore, but there's one that they made. It's just a better club for hitting like a chip and run type shot. It's just easier. It's heavier. It has a wide sole on it. It glides through a lot easier. I can't remember what it was called, but they were selling it for a while. We tested it out, and it's just an easy club. It has like pitching wedge loft on it, I think. Just an easy club. Ping's making one now. I think they're calling it like the chipper, without the ER on the end for some reason. It's just chip R. But it's a better looking one than that other one. Probably higher quality too. But yeah, I would have that club, and I would have something like a C3I wedge or Alien type wedge with a super high bounce on it that makes it easier. I would also have a club that has, a wedge that has very little bounce on it. I would have a plethora of wedges in my bag if I could, if you could carry like 20 clubs or 18 clubs or something like that. If you could carry a lot more clubs, if it was legal to do that. Because you kind of have to make the most of typically most people are going to have a high lofted wedge like a 58 or a 60, then like a middle lofted wedge would be like a 54, 56, then you're going to have like a 50, 52, and then you're going to have a pitching wedge. So most people are going to have something like that. But heck, if you could have, and they're typically I generally recommend like a medium amount of bounce to a little bit, quite a bit of bounce. Now, if you play somewhere with really tight and firm conditions, you may benefit more from having like middle to lower bounce. But I think most of us aren't playing in conditions like that. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. If we have any more questions, keep them coming. Teton makes a chipper club. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, there's several of them out there. I saw the ping one that came out with this past year. It looked pretty good. I haven't gotten a chance to use it, but it looked pretty good. So RC says, "What's best bounce for courses on Kiwa Island?" Couldn't tell you. I played. Generally, I recommend. So here's. I don't know what the conditions are like at Kiwa Island. I played one course on Kiwa Island. I can't remember what it was called. It was the one that was designed by Tom Watson. I can't remember what it's called. I think it starts with a C. It was a great course. I would say for that one, medium bounce would be good. It's got some tight areas around the green, so medium bounce I would say it would be good. So I would guess a lot of the courses there would be would be good, kind of like a medium bounce kind of club. So that would be a club that would be 8-10 degrees of bounce, something like that. I would say if you play in kind of plush, soft conditions where the ball is like sitting up, quite a bit, a higher bounce club is going to be a better club. 10, 12, maybe even 14 degrees of bounce, right? Generally, I would say, anywhere from 8 to 12 is going to be good for most people. I don't recommend a very low bounce club for most people just because it just makes it more difficult. Cougar Point, no, that wasn't. It was one word. Of course, they're very similar. Sand, soft fairways, very firm and cut short. Yeah, it wasn't Cougar Point. It was. You got me thinking of it. Kasich. Kasicki or Keswick. I can't remember how you pronounce it, but that's the one that I played. It was awesome. It was a great course. So Paul S says, I heard you advise us to practice both draw shots. I hit a draw. What's the basics for hitting a fade? So basically, yeah, I do recommend practicing both draws and fades because it doesn't mean that you're going to hit. So it sounds like you're a draw player, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to go to the course, while you're playing, you're going to be curving it both ways. You can do that, but generally most players aren't doing that. There are definitely some players that do that. Tiger does that. Thomas does that. There are players out there that do work it both ways. But generally, it's really from player to player, but generally I would think kind of having one kind of like stock shot shape that you're really confident in is typically going to be a better way to go for most players. So you don't practice hitting draws and fades so that way you go on the course and hit draws and fades. You practice hitting draws and fades so that way your draw doesn't turn into a hook, right? Because if you have one shot shape and all you do is just practice that one shot shape all the time, then your draw can turn into a hook and a block, right? So if your path, if you're always hitting draws, your path can get too much from the inside, and if it gets too much from the inside, then you have a hard time controlling things, right? So if you're practicing hitting fades, then your draw is just never going to get too much. Your path isn't ever going to get too much from the inside because you're going to need to practice hitting fades. So basically, what needs to happen, what happens when you hit a draw, is the face is closed to your path, right? So if we understand that, it's the opposite for a fade. The face is open to the path. So basically, you just need to have the face more open as you're coming through. You can also swing a little bit more to the left. So for a draw, you might swing a little bit more inside your toe line like this. And then for a fade, you may swing a little less inside your toe line. Still inside your toe line, but then just have the face open as you're coming through. And that's going to make the ball fade. So I'm probably in a similar boat that you are. I predominantly hit mostly draws out on the course. I might hit a few fades here and there just when it's not. I can hit fades, and I'm fairly confident in that. I'm more confident in a draw, and I like the feel of a draw, and I have more control of it, um, uh, because it's just my natural shot shape. But I can hit fades out on the course. I'm fairly confident in it. So I hit them every now and then, but I would say 95% of the full swing shots that I make are draws. But when I hit a draw, basically what I'm doing is I'm lining up my feet relative to the target, right? They're along the target line. I'm going to have my club pass shallowed out. It's going to be from the inside. I'm going to let that face turn over, right? I'm going to let the natural momentum of the face turn that over. And that's going to be a draw. So when I hit a fade, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my body and I'm going to align myself more to the left. That's going to get my path more to the left. I'm still going to swing the club in the same place relative to my body, but I'm going to have it a little bit more to my left. And then I'm basically holding off that face. So for a draw, I let the momentum of the club kind of turn over to get that club face close to my path, right? But for a fade, I'm going to hold that face. I'm going to let that face stay open so that way the ball can curve to the right. That's the way that I do it. Another way that you can do it would be to aim your body to the left, take a weaker grip, and just kind of take the same swing, and you're still letting the face turn over, but because you're taking a weaker grip, the face is staying open a little bit. It's a little bit more open, right? Now, for you in the beginning stages of this, because you sounds like you don't really hit fades ever or on purpose, right? So you may need to feel like you're hitting a big banana slice. So that's what I would start out with. I'd feel like you're coming over the top with an open face. Try to hit big banana slices in the beginning and then tone it down. And then what I would do is I just alternate between the two. I'd hit a draw, then turn around, hit a fade, hit a draw, hit a fade. And if you do that, you will never get too far away from where neutral is. If you only hit draws all the time, then your path will tend to drift, a little bit too far from the inside, and you can end up with a block hook kind of miss. Tiger, what he actually did is he hit the 9 shot shapes. So he would practice hitting through the window. So you would have a high draw, low draw, medium trajectory draw, then have high fade, low fade, medium trajectory fade, and then you would have the straight high, low, and medium kind of shot. So when you get to a certain level, you can definitely do that as well. But I would just start out. Doesn't matter what the trajectory is. I would just start out hitting draws and fades, just getting the ball in the curve both ways, so that way you can get good at controlling your ball flight. So Willis says, lately I swing with no force or muscle and shots go farther and straighter. Tour players seem to spend a lot of time in the gym getting stronger. Do you think it is a big advantage to be stronger, since it seems to me that technique is much more important? You have to, if you want to hit the ball farther. So first of all, what you're talking about is a feel. You're not literally not using any force or muscle. You definitely are. You're just, what you're doing is more of a feel. So essentially, you're just not tensing up and trying to muscle up the ball. You're still using your muscles, right? You're just probably just using them in a little bit better way to try to get more of a whip from the ball. But yeah, if you look at, you got to think about like the difference between like a tour player and and your average Joe golfer, right? A tour player already has really good technique. So you got to think like, what can they do to get better, to hit the ball farther? Well, some of it can be staying in better shape, getting stronger in the gym, that sort of thing. So yeah, I definitely think it can help. Now, if you're someone who is coming over the top, coming down steep, and slicing the ball everywhere, hooking the ball everywhere, the most important thing to that golfer is not going to be getting in the gym, right? Getting stronger. The most important thing to that golfer is probably going to be working on their technique, working through something like the 20-minute shallowing fix. So yeah, that's it can definitely be an advantage to be stronger hit the ball farther. I mean, just look at like, the evolution of a lot of these golfers, right? And how, a lot of them are hitting the ball farther now. And a lot of it's because they're getting in the gym, they're getting stronger, you know, the days of, you know, you uh, drinking all day and then, not, not really taking care of your body and things like that. I think the days like that are over for the most part for the highest level of golfers. Uh, if you look at a lot of those golfers, they're taking care of their body. They may not be going to the gym to be like bodybuilding, right? But a lot of them are to get their body stronger and more endurance and stuff like that. So last question here is from Paul S. Says, with a mid iron in your hands at the top of your backswing, would you stop and freeze frame so that I can get a mind image of where my right elbow in relationship to my torso rib cage? Many, many thanks. So basically, and this is mid iron, driver, whatever. It doesn't really matter the club. And everybody, here's the thing too, is that there's no one place, of where you need to be. But generally speaking, just kind of talk about the motion of the trail arm. We want to have some lifting, right? We want to have some bending, typically no more than 90 degrees of bend. We don't see much more than anyone that's much more than 90 degrees. There's going to be some bending back of the wrist, and there's going to be some hinging up of the wrist, right? And then I'm going to have some what's called external rotation, so rotation of my shoulder, and there will typically be some rotation of my forearm as well. So if I do that, if I take my body out of it and I just go like that, right? That's the top of my swing, right? So now if I do that and I add my left arm to it, right? There's my left arm, and then I get my posture and then I turn, there's the top of the swing, right? So if I do that same thing from here, right? If I go to the top, there's going to be some raising of my arm. There's going to be some bending. There's going to be some external rotation, some bending back my wrist, right? So it's going to be like that. I put my left arm on it. I go to the top of the swing. There's the top of the swing position, right? The biggest issues that I see is one would be over bending this arm. So we get like this, and also getting the arm too far away from the chest, right? So we want to kind of keep that arm in front of us. So the reason why that's important is that if you go up to the top of the swing and you're like this, and you start down, that elbow's behind you, right? You're going to have to stall out your body to get your arms to get back in front, because you can't keep rotating from this position unless you're like Jim Furyk and you can get your body 70, 80 degrees open at impact. So what's going to happen from here is you're going to stall your body so that way you can get your arms back in front. So the very, very common issue that I see. So I really try to feel like that elbow never, ever gets behind you. If you had, let's say you had a rod going through your rib cage here, right? It was kind of going through like this, through the middle of my rib cage. I would try to feel like that arm, that elbow never, ever gets behind that. It stays in front of that throughout the entire swing. If it gets behind it, it bends. Your shoulder internally rotates, your arm bends too much, and then your arm moves away from your chest too much. It does any of that, it's going to be very, very difficult to have a pro-like downswing, because you're going to have to stall your body to get your arms back in front. Now, if you're like Jim Furyk and you can really rotate your body through impact like he does, then it can work. Obviously, it works well for him. But I think 99.9% of golfers just are physically not going to be capable of doing that. So we want to have that position where we're like in here. A good way to think about it is like from the 20-minute shallowing fix when Clay goes to the chopping sequence, right? So if I have my elbows, if I start out with that and I'm chopping wood, right? I'm driving with my elbows, right? Well, if I get my elbow behind me, I can't drive with my elbow because it's stuck behind me, right? So I'm going to have to stall my body to get it unstuck, right? So if I'm chopping wood, and now if I go to chopping a tree, the baseball swing, look what my elbows are doing now. My elbows are in front, right? And then if I do that at the golf ball, right, I'm here. But no one ever chops down a tree like this, right? But I see a lot of golfers doing that in their golf swing. So it's because of where that arm gets. We're overbending it, we're moving it too far away. and then we're internally rotating it. We need to keep it externally rotated. We need to keep it in front of our body some amount, right? So if you think about the angle, let's say, my chest and my arm, my upper arm here are creating a 90-degree angle. I basically don't want to go much more than that. What I would say that's probably 110. So I've gone like that. If I go more than that, right, and then I add that top of my swing, right, it's going to go behind me. So I need to have it somewhat in front of me, so that way I can move that in front of my body as I'm coming down. That's that rod that goes through my rib cage here. If I had a rod going through my rib cage like that, I don't want my elbow getting behind that ever in the swing, because that's going to lead to issues. But it's a very, very common thing that I see in a lot of golfers. All right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, last one of the week. We won't have office hours on Friday. So thanks everybody for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow.